As Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness himself, takes center stage and eclipses the storied Led Zeppelin, the rock world is in a frenzy. Ozzy is known for never holding back his opinions, and his latest public criticism of Led Zeppelin has rocked the music industry. In addition to their music, they were characterized by their excesses, egos, and sinister underbelly. Hearing such remarks from Osbourne, who shared the same wild rock lifestyle, was upsetting to many. However, he discussed Zeppelin's notorious conceit, their careless actions, and how their unbridled egos frequently caused them to despise other musicians in his characteristically direct manner. He has hinted that they behaved as though they were untouchable, explaining how their contempt for other rock groups led to tensions that persisted for many years. Ozzy's dislike of Led Zeppelin was personal and went beyond their demeanor. Having spent years attempting to establish himself in the music scene, he was familiar with the band's sense of superiority, especially that of Jimmy Page and Robert Plant. Their arguments shaped the rock hierarchy of the day and went beyond simple backstage rumors. And Osbourne is finally revealing the truth after years of silence, exposing that Led Zeppelin's reality was much darker than their myth, hidden beneath the iconic anthems and packed stadiums. Osbourne is known for being open and honest, and his new disclosures have rocked the music industry by exposing personal issues, rivalries, and scandals that afflicted the legendary band. Frequently praised as rock gods, Led Zeppelin was no new to controversy. Their musical brilliance could be overshadowed by the tangle of disputes and controversies that surround their captivating performances. For example, their North American tour in 1977 was a chaotic affair. When ticketless supporters tried to attack the Riverside Coliseum in Cincinnati, more than 70 were arrested, causing glass doors to break and tensions to rise. In the same year, a violent thunderstorm forced the abrupt cancellation of a Tampa Stadium event, sparking a disturbance that left many people injured and arrested. Internal band dynamics were as turbulent, with shadows of their enormous success beginning to appear. It all revolved around guitarist Jimmy Page, whose spiral into heroin addiction in the middle of the 1970s became widely known. Page became thin, unstable, and more detached from reality as what started off as an enjoyment became into a full-blown addiction. His once exciting energy-filled performances started to falter, and his bony body and empty gaze during the 1977 tour shocked both fans and industry insiders. Sometimes he was a ghost on stage, barely keeping up with the band, and other times he performed with transcendent brilliance. "I was dismissed from the best job I've ever had. Since they faced a difficulty. I stand by what I've already said about Tony Iommi. The band's infamous lifestyle, frequent touring, the demands of upholding their dominance in the rock industry, and the copious amounts of narcotics in their immediate environment all contributed to Page's difficulties. But he wasn't the only one who had to deal with his decline. It put a lot of strain on Led Zeppelin's bass, destroying their relationship and escalating tensions in the background. As Page became more reclusive and frequently retreated into a fog of heroin-induced psychosis, the situation deteriorated and he became almost unreachable, even by his closest allies. His difficulties weren't unique. Peter Grant, the band's enormous and feared manager, was similarly engulfed in addiction, with cocaine being his preferred vice. Formerly a formidable force. As Grant's drug addiction worsened, he lost control over the band, making rash choices and exploding outbursts that only made things worse. Once the backbone of Zeppelin's empire, Page and Grant turned into liabilities as their addictions weakened the band's foundation. The rifts among Led Zeppelin grew as the excesses increased, posing a threat to the mythos they had painstakingly constructed. The conflicts in Led Zeppelin frequently spilled out into the outer world, sometimes with disastrous results, and weren't limited to their members. During their 1977 tour, they hired John Bindon, a violent and dreaded London criminal, in a legendary incident. Bindon was more than simply a rough guy in his role as security coordinator. Being in Zeppelin's camp only heightened the already tense atmosphere around the band, as he was well known for his ties to the criminal underworld. The choice to include Bindon turned out to be disastrous. Tensions increased during a performance at the Oakland Coliseum when Bindon and manager Peter Grant, along with other band members, got into a violent brawl with promoter Bill Graham's employees. The altercation swiftly became heated. One of Graham's workers was severely assaulted, leaving him unconscious and covered in blood. Unrestrained by his aggressive tendencies, Bindon was a major contributor to the attack. What ought to have been a successful performance became a nightmare for public relations and the law. The fallout was quick and devastating. Authorities quickly stepped in and took Bindon and other Zeppelin camp members into custody. In addition to causing legal disputes, the incident damaged the band's reputation for all time. Even people used to rock star excess were stunned by the attack's ruthlessness, and the band, who were already well known for their outrageous antics, were instantly perceived as something much darker. This was more than simply another run-in with the law for Led Zeppelin. The frightening, unbridled power that had started to eat them from within was revealed in that instant. Along the way, the band also experienced severe personal traumas that left them permanently scarred. In 1977, frontman Robert Plant experienced unfathomable grief when his 5-year-old son, Karak, became unexpectedly ill and passed away from a serious stomach bug. Plant's world was shattered in an instant by the news, which hit him like a lightning strike. The moment that would haunt him for the rest of his life was when he got the call while on tour thousands of miles away. For a moment, it appeared as though Plant might never be able to return to music because of the immense pain of losing a kid. The destruction went beyond Plant. The tragedy acted as another crack in an already deteriorating foundation, shattering the band as a whole. Fans were devastated by the sudden cancellation of the tour, but it was an unavoidable choice. Plant's heart was so broken that it was impossible for him to perform any longer. In the months that followed, even his bandmates, who were notorious for their wild excesses, were cautious around him as friends and family concerned about his mental health and sadness. The loneliness Plant experienced in Led Zeppelin added to his grief. Despite their empathy, Page, Bonham, and Jones were unable to provide him the emotional support he sorely needed because they were preoccupied with their own problems. There were rumors that Plant, unable to balance the demands of the rockstar life with his personal tragedy, had thought about leaving Led Zeppelin completely. It briefly appeared as though this might be the tipping point, when Led Zeppelin would ultimately fall apart due to its own excesses and tragedies. It wasn't just Ozzy Osbourne who had problems with Led Zeppelin. Even among their contemporaries, the band developed a reputation over the years for being challenging to collaborate with. Their conflicts with other musicians were well known, and many musicians, including Osbourne, felt betrayed by their contemptuous and even patronizing demeanor. Zeppelin was known to dismiss other rock bands during their heyday because they thought they were better than them. Even though both bands were simultaneously ruling the rock scene, Osbourne remembered times when they hardly acknowledged Black Sabbath. The anxiety was personal as well as professional. Zeppelin's self-seriousness clashed with Osbourne's wild, unbridled energy, and he wasn't hesitant to criticize them for what he perceived to be their exaggerated feeling of significance. The band's togetherness was further stressed by interpersonal issues, which gradually eroded the foundation that had once made them an unstoppable force in rock. Long considered Led Zeppelin's quiet core, bassist John Paul Jones was becoming more and more estranged from the group's inner circle. When Jimmy Page and Robert Plant got back together for a string of well-publicized joint ventures in the middle of the 1918s, Jones was totally left out of the picture, and tensions peaked. A deep personal wound that went right to the core of the band's history, the snub was more than simply business. Jones, who was typically taciturn and diplomatic, was unable to conceal his annoyance when he was questioned about his exclusion. He famously claimed that he found out about the reunion via television, just like everyone else. For years, the animosity had been simmering. For a long time, Jones felt marginalized because the Page-Plant duo's creative and destructive dynamic dominated the band's image and frequently eclipsed his efforts. He had discreetly put up with his bandmates' excesses during the 1970s. His forbearance had its limitations, though, despite the drugs, egos, and internal strife. He had emotionally separated himself from the turmoil by the time Led Zeppelin broke up after John Bonham's untimely death in 1980. Page and Plant retreated into a more subdued career, working with musicians outside the band's sphere of influence, while yet carrying on the Zeppelin tradition. However, Jones was not the end of the feuds. Members of Zeppelin became involved in acrimonious arguments with members of their own management team, erstwhile collaborators, and industry leaders throughout the years. Even though the band's notorious manager, Peter Grant, exercised strict control, the rifts continued to develop. The band's reputation would be plagued by disputes over royalties, composition credits, and personal grievances, demonstrating that even the rock gods were susceptible to the same issues that destroy so many artistic collaborations. Led Zeppelin's impact on rock music endures despite the numerous obstacles. Their perseverance is demonstrated by their ability to create classic music despite going through both personal and professional catastrophes. Osbourne's admissions serve as a painful reminder of the human frailties that frequently accompany popularity, however, since even legends are susceptible to the traps of fame. Although fans were taken aback by Ozzy's critiques, they also reflected long-standing feelings throughout the rock community. It turns out that Led Zeppelin's success was due to more than just skill. It was about control, power, and sometimes just plain conceit. Their narrative is as much about the conflicts, scandals, and rivalries that shaped them as it is about their revolutionary accomplishments. Osbourne's remarks act as a last admission, making admirers face the fact that even the greatest rock gods experienced some bad times. Led Zeppelin's impact on rock music endures despite the numerous obstacles. Their perseverance is demonstrated by their ability to create classic music despite going through both personal and professional catastrophes. Osbourne's admissions serve as a painful reminder of the human frailties that frequently accompany popularity, however, since even legends are susceptible to the traps of fame. Led Zeppelin's story is a complicated balancing act between genius and mayhem. A story intertwined with both self-destructive excess and musical genius. Their name is inscribed in the history of rock as a symbol of creativity, defiance, and wild spirit. However, underlying their dazzling concerts and anthemic riffs was a band on the verge of collapse. Their quick ascent was only surpassed by the chaos that followed them everywhere, and they left behind a legacy that is both famous and profoundly problematic. They were plagued by addiction and personal fear. There was a night of mayhem that threatened to topple every arena they packed with exuberant spectators. The chaos that drove their music was inextricably linked to its appeal. Relentless tour schedules, unbridled egos, and an insatiable desire for extravagance. Although they were titans, they were also people, and as such, they were susceptible to the same demons that have devoured innumerable rock stars both before and after them. Generations have been inspired by their music, securing their status as one of the finest bands ever. However, the more somber tales of their disputes, scandals, and personal hardships serve as a stark reminder of the price of celebrity, the perils of overindulgence, and the thin line separating creative genius from self-destruction. Ultimately, Led Zeppelin represented the successes and tragedies of a period, not just its definition.